Hi, Mr. Jenkins. We're Vitamin D's today, here for another talk show. I'm Mr. Pessoa.
Mr. Toro.
Mr. Ilya. Miss Palmer.
And Mr. Martin over here.
All right, so let's get started. Mr. Ilya will start us off.
Okay. Well, my OQ is in the Metamorphosis. How do the parents withhold helping their son Gregor in hopes that he's just going through a phase? Like how in real life, your parents, if they think you're going through a phase, just kind of let you do your thing and hope that you'll turn out to be fine when your phase is over.
So I'm assuming you're referring to the fact that even though Gregor gets sick, turns into a bug, and kind of lives in his room, his parents or family members at no point go out and try and help him go see a doctor.
Yeah, like they don't really look for a cure really because they're hoping that he's just going through a phase and that he'll hopefully wake up one morning and be a person again.
Yeah.
I think tying it with how busy he was before and how stressed he was, it does relate to real life. Where if your parents see you really stressed out and you're just obsessing over something, they tend to ignore it and just wait and hope that it just sort of passes.
Word. I'm kind of looking at page 105. This is where Greta goes up to the mother and father and says, we have to get rid of this thing. We have to just basically get rid of Gregor. Or actually, doesn't say get rid of Gregor, just get rid of this thing, get rid of it. At this point, they've pretty much completely, how do you say it, cut off, or, cut off Gregor at this point. He's no longer Gregor, he's just simply a bug. And, relating that to a real life situation is difficult because you have to think of something that's severe that occurs, and I think in real life you still have a lot of parents that want to keep their children together, no matter what happens. You always have that crazy uncle or that cousin that did that one thing that one time that got him arrested. And so it's hard to really cut someone off. So in the real world, I think that is less likely. But in this book, it seems like there's a definite theme. I mean, both from the mother, father, and really the sister.
But at the beginning, his family did care that he was a bug. I'm looking on page 41 specifically is where it starts. Gregor just answered to the manager and the family outside the door, look, I'm okay, I'm getting out of bed, everything's fine, I'm headed to work. And then everyone's freaking out. Right before that, on page 38 too, or 39, did you understand a single word? It's okay. The mom starts crying, and the family is legitimately worried about him. So I think, even though they didn't realize at this moment of time on page 39 what was happening with Gregor and what the changes had occurred overnight, I think they still do care, but the transformation throughout the book leads them to not caring, or this endless hopelessness of not being able to find a cure. And that can go back to phases my family member is going through a drug phase. Right now I'm going to care for him and really support him and try to get him out of it. But 2 years down the road,
it'll only go so far.
It'll only go so far before it's I can't do this anymore because it's hurting me.
And at that point, that's kind of, I was maybe a little premature on my explanation, because at that point, that's when the sister would go to the parents and say, listen, we can't support Gregor anymore. He's doing all these drugs or whatever. We can't support this family member. So, whether it's being a bug or whether you're, driving your car too fast every single day, getting speeding tickets every day.
And I think
it applies to a lot of things.
I think that's a practical
I think also like compared to like reality, if a parent initially they care about you or they care about that situation, but they don't know how to handle it, so they think it's just a phase. They're like, all right, we'll let it pass. But if it takes too long, it gets to the point that your parents also feel like you're not who you are, and they start to see you as a different person or a different animal, in this case. So that it's a lot easier to like push you off, like out of the family, out of that used to know you. Like they don't know you anymore. Right?
Well, why don't you guys think like after their like initial shock of seeing Gregor, they wouldn't want to be like, we need to get you help right now, because when something happens and your parents are like, oh, it's just a phase, like the first time it happens, they're not saying it's just a phase. Does that make sense?
That's what I was going to allude to is the fact that, yeah, I mean, just like in this story, Gregor's family cares for him. They're there for him and whatnot. Just like, say, you have your parent, your son or daughter is going through a drug phase. You're there for him. But it's almost interesting the fact that they didn't try and go seek help elsewhere to get him fixed.
Right.
Or get him, or switch him back from a bug to a human. Or like somebody say going through a drug phase or a hard time, see them go see a psychiatrist or a therapist or someone to help them out there. That's what I thought was rather interesting, kind of related to your OQ.
Yeah, and I don't think this book is the perfect, or it doesn't translate perfectly to real life for many reasons. Part of which a person becomes an
Insect.
Right off the bat. Line one.
So I think there's like some parallels we can draw, but the story of Gregor and his relationship to his family can't be applied perfectly to our relationships with our families or people struggling with their families.
I think that brings us to a good segue into your question, really. Right?
Yeah, I think so. So my OQ is, I'm wondering why Gregor isn't actively looking for ways to become human again. Why is he content just being a bug? And then in the same line, is Kafka trying to say something like, are there flaws in ourselves that we just want to ignore and that we don't actively have to seek to fix in our own lives? Is that what he's alluding to by this, or is it just like Gregor doesn't care about becoming human again?
Well, you go first.
You go.
Okay, in my own life, I think the only way to fix a flaw is to know that it exists. If you're not going to fix a flaw, you won't know it exists already. So, I mean, he immediately realizes that he has a problem.
But does he see it as a problem ever? Like, he recognizes he's a bug, but he's still, like, content on getting out of bed, opening the door, catching the train, going to work. Like, he's a giant bug.
He doesn't focus on his problem. He knows his problem.
Maybe he's like in
Focus.
denial that like he can't go to work and he can't do anything like he used to. So maybe he's just like, oh, like it's fine, I can still do it. Like just let me figure it out, and then.
But that
Initially, he is like that until
Yeah.
he realizes that he can't do it anymore. And I think that's when he realizes that he's not himself. And then, as we already sort of know, like he slowly went into that insect mentality because he had nowhere else to go because that's who he is now.
Right. And then that sounded like almost like an alcoholic. Like you're in denial that you're an alcoholic, but eventually, like you realize you have this problem, but then you hit rock bottom, and that's when he can't move around well. He's sick. He's dying, and that's I think a pretty
Tied to that, actually, take it a little next step is if you are an alcoholic, you had a bad night of being an alcoholic and you keep doing it, it gets to a point that you start taking the mannerisms of that person, of what you know of them being, and you become more like that.
an alcoholic.
Yeah, because you're like, well, I drink all the time, I'm drunk and all that. Well, like, just subconsciously we know that I'm supposed to be mean and like ruthless, and then that tends to be the case in every situation in that case.
So what about for Gregor?
He becomes more bug-like.
Okay.
I can see that. Also, I mean, when I was reading, I almost saw him as once he turned into a bug, realized he couldn't do anything. It's almost like he kind of gave up on trying to get out of this life. Kind of like guy's got a bunch of different stuff going wrong for him in his life, and he's just got to a point where like, okay, I can't do anything more. Just kind of give up on life and kind of his goals and achievements or what he wants to achieve.
But he
Just
never
kind of
gave up on his family.
not on his family, but I mean in his own life of what, like he was working all the time,
Oh.
trying to provide for his family, and now all he's doing is sitting around. He seems content with just sitting around
Well,
and not doing anything.
does Gregor have dreams for himself or just his family? Like, does he
It
have
seems like he's
anything,
putting, like,
any
his
drive
dreams
for
his
himself?
I
family
think-
before his dreams for himself. Like he could have dreams for himself, but he has bigger dreams for his family that he wants to help them like achieve before he. It's like he's putting his family first before himself.
Because he said that he would have loved to quit his job, but he's got to repay this debt. And they said, well, because he also talked about once you repay the debt, and was it 5 or 6 more years, then he want to go out, quit his job, and do something else. So, like I said, putting his family's goals and just needs ahead of his, getting that out of the way, and then once that's taken care of,
Yeah, like
going
once
out.
his family is all set, taken care of, like they have
Right.
everything they need, then he
Right.
can focus on himself and like
Right.
figure out what he wants to do.
I would agree with that.
I agree with that. All right, so we'll move on to the next OQ, which is mine. So my question is there any correlation between your family at work compared to your central family? So his family at work was that firm, like the sales firm, and compared to the central family of his parents and his sister and him. And also another tangent is like where, and compare. So currently in this story, he has a negative business experience and then the negative family experience. What if he had a positive business experience, a positive family at work? Would he have a positive family? Because if we compare, for example, in the firm, if you're not performing well, you're cut, and if you're performing very well, you're pushed to better things. And the family, Gregor did not perform well; he was cut or killed, and Greta was performing well, and she was pushed for higher things.
I mean, he wasn't killed. He kind of killed himself.
Yeah, but
But he's cut off from the rest of the family.
Right.
Almost. They kind of
He was
just like
certainly
kept
cut
him,
off.
right? Cut off from him,
And
not
that's where
necessarily
it ends up
killed,
killing
but
him.
cut off from the rest of the family.
especially with the apple, like essentially he was killed by that. But just to not defer from the question. Let's
I think
ignore
it's
it.
interesting. I mean,
Killed.
when I first heard that and actually read the book, I was thinking about the whole Gregor, like, he did perform poorly in his job and workplace. He got cut off from there, and kind of what happened in his family as well. But when he mentioned Greta, it kind of just was interesting to me because she all of a sudden started taking care of Gregor and took on a bunch more responsibility, and the family kind of started to rely on her more and more, whereas before Gregor got sick, became a bug, she really didn't have any chores or really anything to do with the family. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
I think to answer your question, we also have to think about the possibility of Gregor's father's business never failing. So if that was the positive business, would the family be more positive? Would it be more supportive? And for that, to answer kind of my own question and that thought, I think that if Gregor's family was more supportive and Gregor going out and supporting them, or if Gregor's family was more supportive of the father working his job, if like his business never failed, then it would be a lot more positive family atmosphere. But when things get tough for a family, it's hard to keep like the bad things at work and the good things in the family. So I think eventually with Gregor's family, and we kind of see this in the book, just like this overlap of just being down and bad luck with business, and the family unable to cope with that, so they just take on the burdens.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like if you go to work and like you have an awful day at work, you're gonna come home and be in a bad mood and like treat your family like badly, like you know what I mean? So I think that like relates to that.
And going off that, I don't think it's just like a one-time thing that like a father comes home after a bad day at work. But if it like he can have a bad day once in a while, but if it continues to happen more often than not, then it's really hard to keep that negative attitude outside of whatever positivity was once there.
Okay. Now, do you guys think that that negativity might be coming from his poor performance, quote, by the chief. If he's not because they relied so heavily upon Gregor at that time, in the beginning of the book, there would be that sort of sense of, well, we're not really happy with Gregor at this point because he's not really making a lot of money. He's not really. It's gonna take 5 to 6 years for him to pay off this debt. What do we like? Why is he still here? Why are we keeping him around? So you get that. Once you get that mindset in your head, I think it would be really hard for the family to kind of lose that, especially once he turns into something that is completely useless in the sense that he can't work. And,
Well, kind of off that point, even though Gregor was performing unsatisfactory, on page 36, it says that. This is the manager speaking.
Right.
He says, "To be sure, the boss did suggest one possible explanation for your absence this morning. It concerns the cash payments recently entrusted to your care." So he had some sort of cash. There was some sort of business, even though it might have been miserable business. He was still getting paid. He was still having success in this bad time, but it might have not been to the company's success. So I think that's just important to keep in mind that successes were still happening for Gregor, even though the company didn't want to recognize it, and he was being worked to the bone.
So he was able to put food on the table, but he wasn't really benefiting the company.
Yes.
So we're basically relating the relationship with with Gregor and the company and Gregor with his family. So if he's not. Maybe he's putting food on the table for the family, but he's not really making any money for the family, just like he's not making any money for the company. So he can't move out, which is what they kind of want to do. Or did Gregor want to do that? Or I think the family wanted to find a more affordable and more appropriate spot.
I think it was the family.
Okay. Right. So, if he wasn't making, that's a great correlation, I think, that you pointed out there.
Nailed the head.
Nailed it.
Got it.
So let's move on to the next.
Okay. So I wanted to kind of dive into this idea of freedom. So did Gregor have to use his freedom? Did Gregor have to lose his freedom through his metamorphosis in order for the other family members to gain their own freedom? So he turns into a bug. He becomes stuck in this room. He is unable to leave the house, and eventually he dies in this room and ultimately loses all of his freedom. But at the end of the book, you have this kind of interesting point where personally, I think Greta is the one that gains the most freedom. It says, and when they arrived at their destination, it seemed to them almost a confirmation of their new dreams, their new freedom, per se, and good intentions when their daughter swiftly sprang to her feet and stretched her young body. She's stretching out, and she is, unlike Gregor, stretching out into the world where, and becoming free, and free to do what she wants, find a husband, find a good job, whatever.
When I first read the book and I got to the end, that last line really struck me as interesting because at the beginning of the book, the family relied so heavily on Gregor. They relied completely on him to not only provide food for them, but then to get them out of this debt. And when you just read it, I believe that was the parents speaking, or just like the parents' thoughts.
Right.
And it said that...
I think that's Kafka's.
Kafka's speaking, right, or thoughts, but they're talking about the parents there. And it almost makes it sound like they're putting all their eggs in the basket of Greta and looking to her to then go ahead and support the family now that Gregor's gone.
So it's like Greta's the new Gregor.
Right. That's almost like a transformation or the metamorphosis that I got from reading this, that Greta's kind of, now that Gregor's gone, taking up his role to kind of get his family out of the dumps.
I think that is true, and going back from what we discussed with my OQ, pretty much it's that the family saw Greta as a positive, as she's doing better and better, especially after, as you were mentioning, Gregor lost his freedom, and when he lost his freedom, Greta was the one who sort of took it away from him, in the sense that she had to take care of him, that new position of the family opened up, and she just became. It was her first opportunity to work for the family. And then when the family saw that she was doing really, really well, and she got the sales job, she went and learned French and stenography, and just really worked hard to do better. So they just sort of pushed her and hoped that there's new dreams, new intentions for her.
To me, you guys, it seems like you're contradicting what I'm saying, though. Because if she's going to do that,
yeah.
she's now she's now losing her freedom again. Because she's now has to work for the family. Her family's relying upon her.
But it's kind of like she is, like, working for the family, but she's also, like, learning French so she can do better in the job. Like, she doesn't necessarily have to be great at her job to be able to provide for the family, but she wants to get better at it. So, like,
it's like financial freedom, maybe.
Well,
maybe and just like personally, like she has her own goals that she wants to achieve while helping out the family, so she can be just like an average salesperson and like be able to provide for her family. But personally, like she wants to take herself to like the next level by learning French and be able to do like all these other things.
Also, like the other freedom thing is when she's in the family not doing anything, that's not real freedom. Yeah, she has freedom on what I can do, but then she doesn't have the skill to go out and be free. She has to depend on others. So when she's learning how to sort of do things herself, that's her becoming free. Because now when she's out of the house, she knows how to take care of herself, how to work, how to get money for herself. So now she has freedom of, I can live by myself. I don't have to be dependent.
I do agree. Or I do disagree with your presumption, Mr. Toro.
Right.
I think
Ms. Palmer.
that Gregor didn't have freedom at the beginning of the story, and through his death, he gained his freedom. He wasn't under, and through his transformation into a bug, he gained his freedom. He wasn't under the control of the company. He wasn't under control or the needs of his family. He could just be himself. And himself as a bug probably sucked, but that was freedom for him. And then throughout the story, I think Greta's metamorphosis was losing her freedom because she was this innocent youth who had the whole world in front of her. Gregor wanted to send her to the conservatory, but she was just a teenager. Just like I think of teenagers today, like kids I used to babysit back in high school who are now 13 and just like sitting on their iPhones, like no care in the world, freedom in some sense. Even though they'll argue, no way do I have freedom.
13.
But
right.
And then throughout the story, she moves to supporting the family. She moves into Gregor's position, and now at the end, that last line. Or this last paragraph, just like her parents, like, we need to find her a husband. Like, not Greta saying, I need to go find a husband. Her parents, we need to find her a husband. Like,
that's what's concerning.
She has, like, she's youthful, like, she swiftly sprang to her feet and stretched her young body. Like, she has all this energy, she has this potential that Gregor had at one point before he became a bug, before he became free.
So maybe we could swap out freedom for potential.
I was actually going to switch that to responsibility.
Okay. Well,
because think about it, Gregor had a bunch of responsibilities. So I agree, piggyback on Miss Palmer's. Gregor at the beginning had not really much freedom, but had a bunch of responsibility. The company was relying on him. The family was completely relying on him. And to your OQ, was, does he have to lose that freedom or that responsibility for Greta to gain it? I think he does. I think the answer is yes, because when he then dies or kind of loses his ability to work and provide for the family, somebody has to pick up the slack. Greta now is thrust in position, and all of Gregor's responsibility is now thrown on top of her. So now she's responsible for taking care of the family, as we kind of looked at in that last little scene right there. So
yeah,
I would think that not much freedom, but responsibility, and that Greta kind of needed Gregor's responsibility to lessen for her to kind of gain more.
Okay.
Well, I thought maybe like in their family dynamic or whatever, like maybe they think that there's only like room for one successful person. Like as like with Gregor being successful in his job, like Greta would be not as successful now that he's not being like great at his job. Like now there's room for her to succeed like in the family.
Okay. Well, so it sounds like everyone here kind of disagrees with the sense of freedom, but maybe you could, instead of like just saying freedom, you could kind of exchange it with, a couple other terms. And the bottom line is that Gregor had to give something up
Yes.
in
I can
order
agree with
for some others to gain, gain what they need.
Yes.
I agree with that.
I mean, unless you take it as Gregor's freedom of choice while he was not free by working, his freedom of choice was I want to support my family. And even after he was turned into a bug, he was still supporting the family by helping Greta, as we all agree, become better in one sense or another. But,
I can agree with that as well.
All right, we'll
There you
call
go.
it that.
We'll stop there.
So the last OQ by
I'll take it home.
there you go.
All right, so in class today we discussed this notion that most insect or is it insect right? Beetle
Beetles.
has wings. We discussed this in class today. It wasn't mentioned in the book at all, but I just thought it was interesting in class. And we talked about the fact that Gregor may have wings and that the fact that he may have some knowledge of his wings. And I was questioning why he never used it. Why he never used his wings to kind of escape just kind of the troubled mess he had at home. And was there any correlation to his not using his wings to escape to maybe some untapped or unused potential that he had? And if you guys saw any correlation with that.
Well, we brought this up earlier in the discussion that it doesn't seem like Gregor had any ambitions outside of his family. So if he had wings and he could use them to fly away, I don't think he would, because his entire life, thought process, being revolved around his family.
However, he could have used them just to play around in his room, flying around place to place.
I mean, he's a big bug, though. I mean, he's a human-sized bug. He would have to get out of the room, I think.
Yeah, it said
You
that
could
there
fly
was
a little
barely
bit.
any room to
You wanna
like
hover?
him to even walk though. So I don't know how he would fly.
I mean, there's that one part where he's like hanging from the ceiling and he's afraid he's gonna fall or something. If he would have fallen, like, would he have been able to get his wings out, or?
Yeah, that'd almost be
Just
like
go splat.
an insect instinct. Like a bug, you see like a bug that can fly, it falls, and then all of a sudden its wings come out. You know what I mean? And saves itself. But he would have to have some sort of instinct to use his
Yeah,
potential.
but maybe he didn't even know that he had the instinct or that he had that in him.
Well, instinct, you don't,
Like,
it's
yeah,
like, it's not,
you
lack
just
of
don't-
knowledge.
Yeah,
It's
so
like,
it's just like maybe he, with his potential, like he has it, but he doesn't exactly like know.
he's never had the instance where he falls from the ceiling.
Yeah,
and
he's
he
never
has
had to
his
use his potential. Like
Yeah,
he's always been kind of like cruising through with, like he's never really had to
That makes
dig
sense.
to like be better.
Could it also be that his wings were damaged? When I was thinking of like how he got the apple stuck in his back, if he's a beetle, that's like a hard shell. So I'm thinking it was in that sort of fight with his dad, he might have opened up his like wings and the apple got stuck in there. And then like when it closed, it pretty much became poisonous to him because that's a very, very sensitive part of a beetle.
oh yeah.
There you go.
I mean,
It's a lot more sensitive than the shell.
I
would-
think
that
Gregor
makes
had some sort of bug senses.
Yeah.
Sounds like I'm
Spidey
explaining
senses?
Spider-Man. Like on page 55, it talks about the first time he was like looking for a small, dark space.
Yeah.
And he goes under the setting.
And he likes it there, right?
Yeah, and he loves it there. So I'm thinking like he had some sort of bug senses because most human beings don't like to
Right.
be in small, cramped spaces.
And he liked to crawl on the walls.
Mm-hmm. So there was some sort. I think his wing, even if he did have wings, they would have never appeared, even if he hadn't gotten hurt, because Gregor has no drive except his family. Like he he wouldn't want to use them to have fun and fly around his room.
Right.
He wouldn't want to use them to fly to where he works. Or maybe he would have used them to fly to where he works, but he wouldn't have flown away to escape from his family or anything.
Right.
So I feel like the wings, even if he had them, if he was indeed a beetle, would never come out in Gregor's personality, just because there's no drive behind him.
Like, he was very playful in his room, so I feel like he would test. Like, he was very big on testing things. Like, when he was like, oh, I can do this now. Like, I want to try to do this. So I feel like he would try to use his wings if he could, if they weren't damaged.
I agree, because he kind of used his insect bodily legs and stuff to be able to do that, or insect mentality to enjoy walking on walls and enjoy dark spaces.
And when you think about it, like it's common sense that like bugs have wings. So like I feel like he should have known, like, I'm a bug, I should have wings.
But you also remember, I mean,
Kind of.
when he first realized he was a bug, it took him a long time to figure out how to
Yeah.
kind of maneuver himself in his bug body. So I
Yeah.
mean, maybe he hadn't fully realized the capability or how to use them. And then that kind of translated into not really knowing what we said, like how to use his potential, or knowing that people even had that.
Maybe he was a really good salesman,
Right.
but he didn't know.
Right.
And didn't know how to use his.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and for a backup for that, I think like at the half of the first part was pretty much him not realizing why he couldn't get up. He was just thinking, I can't get up. Why can't I get up? I have to get up. And he didn't realize that he was a bug or that he wasn't himself.
Right. Yep.
All right.
Sounds logical to me.
Good job.
Good
Great.
talk, guys.
All right. That is the Vitamin D's talk show. We'll be back never, I guess.
Sweet. All right. Thank you.
Bye, Mr. G.